So you've downloaded Magic the Gathering Arena and you've played through the color challenges and you're looking to just jump into the queues. Where do you start? Let's today look through the different options, the different formats that are available, and I'm going to specifically talk about the constructed formats. We also have limited, which is a different method that you can use to play the game. That is draft and sealed. But today I specifically want to talk about the constructed formats and explain just what the heck they are. So you'll see we got a bunch of different options. Standard, Alchemy, Historic, Pioneer, and Timeless. There's also this bot match here, which is kind of like a Timeless-esque thing against Sparky. They tend to bring really genuinely terrible decks, and so if you want to just experiment, that's where you go do that. That's not what we're here to talk about today. So, Standard. Standard is, as you can imagine by the name that they chose for the format, meant to be kind of the default way to play the game. Standard is a format that uses only the newest cards that have been printed into paper products. You hear sometimes people refer to standard products, and those are the mainline sets that come out. This does not include Modern Horizons cards or like Secret Lair cards. Those kinds of things do not, or Commander specific cards. They do not impact Standard. But the majority of cards, the majority of new designs that Wizards pumps out in any given year go into Standard. This creates an environment that is constantly changing because the card pool is relatively small. Once per year, cards that are 2 years old or older rotate out of the format, meaning none of them are legal anymore. And so as a result, sometimes your favorite deck, well, every deck in Standard, every single one of them has an expiration date on it of some kind. And that creates a really exciting situation. And so Standard now is completely different than Standard 2 or 3 years ago. Or in many cases, Standard 1 year ago, or even 6 months ago, because any new set can have a drastic impact on how things change. As of this recording, we also recently went through a large banning and a rotation. And so things shook up pretty dramatically. But you'll find Standard often settles pretty quickly too. If you're interested more on that, this is actually my primary format, so twitch.tv/hamhawks42. You can see me over there 5 days a week, probably playing Standard. Now, going down the list, we also have Alchemy. Alchemy is a format that is also a rotating format, meaning that once per year, the older cards fall off. That said, Alchemy is different from Standard in that it rotates in a way that has cards that are 2 years old as the oldest. So it's more aggressive in its rotations. So the cards that will rotate out of Standard next year rotate out of Alchemy this year. I hope I explained that fairly well enough. So as a result, the card pool is actually smaller, except there are also digital-only cards that Wizards is creating and designing specifically for Arena that cannot be done in paper for one reason or another. Cards that use effects like Intensity or Conjuring that actually create cards on the battlefield that behave differently from tokens. That can happen in Alchemy in a way that would be very difficult to emulate on a paper board state. And so that's where you can find those kinds of designs. So there are cards that are available only in Alchemy that will never see play in Standard and will never get printed into Standard by their very nature and very design. This is very polarizing. The community was vocally opposed to Alchemy when it first came out, and there is still some resentment within the community towards it. So if you're just learning, if it's all Magic to you and you just want to get started in a place that will let you play the game, I highly recommend investing in Standard over Alchemy. That said, if you do start in Alchemy as a way to just get a feel for the game, there's nothing wrong with that. It's all Magic. It's all good, baby. So next up on this list, we have Historic. Historic is a non-rotating format where all of the digital-only cards that were inserted into Alchemy, as well as balance changes that were also introduced into Alchemy, are reflected here. So in Historic, you can see cards like Rebalanced Symmetry Sage, which in paper is a terrible card, but it was modified to satisfy Alchemy, and you see that in Historic, and that card is busted. It's incredibly strong, and you see a ton of that. There are cards that behave differently in Historic than they do in true-to-paper format. Alchemy and Historic are very different situations, but by virtue of the fact that Historic does not rotate, you also can build a deck in Historic and be able to play it for potentially years. Now, whether or not it'll be competitively viable, that'll fluctuate as time goes on and new cards get introduced, but a Historic deck today will continue to be an Historic deck moving forward, whereas in Alchemy and Standard, that is not the case. Pioneer. is another non-rotating format, but this one is true to paper. So meaning that all of the cards that you will be able to play in Pioneer, you will also be able to purchase in paper and theoretically play Pioneer, well, in paper at your local game store or at big tournaments when we get big Pioneer tournaments again. Hopefully by the time you're watching this, that comment, that little snide jab doesn't age well. Fingers crossed on that. But Pioneer is a format that has cards dating back to Return to Ravnica, which is a set that came out in 2012. So it's a little bit over 10 years old, but there are tons of cards that were printed earlier than that, or that were not printed into standard legal sets that are available in Historic that are not available here. The biggest glaring example of this is Modern Horizons 3. So you have cards like Guide of Souls, which is a very powerful card in Modern Horizons 3 that is legal in Historic, as well as some other formats that we'll talk about today. It is not legal in Pioneer because it never went through Standard. It was never printed into a Standard set. Modern Horizons was its own thing. At the end of the day, Pioneer is trying to create a non-rotating format where Standard players can take their older decks that they loved and continue to play them. That said, all non-rotating formats often have a very established metagame, and it is difficult for that to shift. It doesn't happen often. The inertia in these formats, it tends to be a little bit slower, but that's by design. Now, the ultimate non-rotating format on Arena is Timeless. The reason that I say it's the ultimate non-rotating format is because Timeless literally doesn't have a single ban in it. Every single card that is legal on the client can be played in Timeless. And so as a result, all of the cards that have been introduced through special guests, like the Evoke Elementals, like Solitude and Grief from, that were originally printed in Modern Horizons 2 and reprinted in Modern Horizons 3. Those aren't legal in most formats. They are a 4 of, just fair game in Timeless. And cards like Necropotence and Dark Ritual that are oftentimes too powerful for other formats are all legal in Timeless. Now, I highly recommend trying Timeless if money is no object and you can burn rare and mythic wild cards, like their firewood. If you can do that, go for it. But at the end of the day, super high-powered Magic plays very differently than lower power Magic. And so if for some reason you are watching this and you're a legacy or vintage player, give Timeless a shot, because I think you'll see a lot of your old favorites seeing play there. And it can actually be very fun. However, a game being decided on turn 1 or 2 is not uncommon in Timeless, and it is uncommon in other formats. So you got to be aware of that. Hyper efficiency is the name of the game. A value 3-drop doesn't see play in Timeless. It'll see play pretty much anywhere else, unless that value is absolutely insane. So Timeless is kind of its own beast, but it is very interesting, and I've definitely had fun tinkering with Timeless as an Arena pundit who wants to experience it all. So it's a cool format, and I am glad it exists on the client, but it's serving a very niche market. Now, the other modes, the other constructed modes that we have. Oh, also, you'll notice this little ticker right up here, the best of 1 versus best of 3. This actually makes a huge difference in the gameplay mode. Starting with best of 1 makes a lot of sense. If you want to play in a paper tournament, those are almost always exclusively best of 3. So be aware. When you're playing best of 3, you get access to a 15-card sideboard, and in between games, after game 1, you can actually take cards out of your deck and pull them in from the sideboard. That is an opportunity to make your deck better in bad matchups, and there is so much content and so many, just hundreds of thousands of hours of discourse around sideboarding philosophy and ways to do it. It is a very interesting element of the game. If that is a little bit overwhelming when you're first getting started, don't worry about it. Just play best of 1. There's nothing wrong with that. But I definitely enjoy best of 3, and I do recommend learning best of 3, especially if you have aspirations of playing competitively in paper. It is actually quite fun. It's great. The format tends to, like Standard, for example, tends to be a little bit slower and much more varied in best of 3 compared to best of 1. Whereas best of 1 definitely favors low to the ground aggressive strategies, which if you like playing low to the ground aggressive strategies, keep that best of 1 and have fun. The other constructed formats that I want to talk about are under this Brawl tab. You'll notice Brawl and the play and ranked queues are all completely separate. The reason for that is there's no ranked queue for Brawl. So Brawl is a purely kind of exhibition game. It's just for fun, which I think is great. I love playing for fun. In the other formats, you're allowed to have up to 4 copies of any individual non-basic land card in your deck, and the pool from which you're pulling is limited. In Brawl, specifically your default mode for Brawl, which was formerly known as Historic Brawl, in Brawl, you have access to most of the cards on the MTG Arena client. So it's almost like Timeless, but not quite. The ban list, there is a ban list, and it's a bit more, it is fairly well curated. But you have a commander, and your commander is a legendary creature or planeswalker or vehicle or spacecraft now, which I'm still getting used to that. That's a relatively new change as of this recording. But you have a legendary commander, and all of the cards within your deck need to be the same colors or in the same color identity as that commander. And you have 100 cards, so the commander plus 99, you're only allowed 1 copy of any individual card. So 100 card deck instead of a 60 card deck, and you're only allowed 1 copy instead of 4 copies. As a result, Brawl, your deck is going to be much less consistent than the other formats, and this is by design, because it is matching the paper format of Commander, which uses these same rules and is oftentimes seen by the community and by its players as a more casual kind of a board game style format where the experience of playing with people is the goal. Commander is a 4-person experience often. You can have pods of any size, but kind of the general default that a lot of people see is 4, which plays well. But in Brawl, it's 1-on-1. And so if you are a Commander player jumping into Arena, Brawl will provide a somewhat familiar experience. However, you are still in a 1-on-1 environment. So targeted removal and counter spells are significantly better in Brawl than they are in Commander because you don't have to split your attention to multiple threats. It's just the one person. And so 1-on-1 with Commander rules plays very differently than multiplayer with Commander rules. Just be aware of that. I'm a casual Commander player. I really like loose, free-flowing, goofy games of Commander. Brawl does not scratch that itch for me at all. It is oftentimes a very one-on-one kind of sweaty environment. Sweaty meaning very competitive, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a perfectly fine method to play the game. But if you're looking for a Commander-like experience, this is the closest you'll get. And depending on what elements of Commander you love, maybe it'll scratch the itch, maybe it won't. We also have Standard Brawl. So Standard Brawl is like Brawl, except you're only allowed the cards that are currently legal in Standard. So this is a rotating version of Brawl, which on the one hand is somewhat interesting. However, I believe the queue times here are going to be fairly high. I do not believe Standard Brawl is a particularly popular format. I could be wrong, but that's a thing. Also, the deck is only 60 cards in this, so it's a commander plus 59 cards in the main deck. So that's another, so they'll be slightly more consistent, even though your card pool is significantly more narrow. So yeah, Brawl is interesting. It is definitely a fun way to play the game. It is casual, and I personally do enjoy playing Brawl with kind of mid to lower powered decks against people I know. Being on a voice chat with somebody as you're brawling is a lot of fun. And I also, on my Twitch channel, accept viewer challenges, and those are often Brawl, and that can be very fun. I very much enjoy a friendly Brawl experience. Also, there is a matchmaking algorithm that Wizards has identified and has acknowledged is a thing in Brawl, where very, very powerful commanders will be paired against other very powerful commanders. The community sometimes refers to that as Hell Queue. That way, the idea is the most powerful, most busted commanders are all playing at a high power level against each other instead of absolutely dunking on, you know, your Phineas Ace Archers. I think bunnies are neat decks, which there's nothing wrong with that. Bunnies are neat, and those decks can be very, very powerful, but they can't compete against a Teferi Hero of Dominaria deck that is capable of countering every single spell you have looked at for the first 10 turns of a game with 7 or 8 board wipes back. The powerful cards are the powerful cards, and they try to keep those separate. Whether or not they're successful, please sound off in the comments below on how you feel about that, because sometimes they hit the mark, sometimes they don't. But at the end of the day, that's the idea. They want the casual Brawl queue to be the casual Brawl queue, and they want the competitive Brawl queue to be the competitive Brawl queue, which good for them. If they hit the mark on that, perfect. It's great. So those are the general formats within Magic Arena. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please hit that thumbs up button. If you want to see more like this, please sound off in the comments below. Also, let me know, what are your favorite formats? formats. When I was first setting off to do this video, I wanted to inject my opinion as little as possible, and as you can see, I failed miserably at that. I hope that's okay. If not, just lambaste me again in the comments below. I will take a look at those. So thank you so much for tuning in. I do appreciate it. Also, if you have any questions about just navigating this game, please let me know. I am an invested Magic the Gathering player who is in this client almost as much as I breathe these days. And so it's easy for me to just go through and not even realize some of the questions that people have. But I want to know what those are so that I can help answer those. I want this client to be accessible to everyone because this game is beautiful and it's for everyone. And that includes you. Thanks for being here. All right, y'all. I'll catch you on the next one.